Hello and welcome to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed Org3D podcast, where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have grown them. Today I'm joined by Ryan Frederick. He is a successful founder, investor and principal of data analytics companies and has been in the space for over 20 years. Ryan, it's a pleasure to have you on the pod today. How are you doing?
Ben, I'm well. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Thanks for being here. So for the benefit of our listeners then, Ryan, perhaps we should kick off with you telling us a little bit about what you are, what your mission is, and the work that you're kind of doing at the moment.
Yeah, it's been a serendipitous journey for sure. I knew I wasn't a big company person at a fairly young age, but I also didn't know what that meant. So it's one of those things where you have clarity around one aspect of something, but then you don't really know how to use that clarity. So I was fortunate enough, I joined a small business that was trying to make a go of a new product in a new market. And we didn't really call them startups back then. There was no startup ecosystem. There weren't startup communities. There wasn't even really a startup, industry at that time. And we had some success with it. And that company ended up selling and then identified another problem, as part of that we could address. So built the product around that. And I think one of the things that's really important, and one of the things that I used to push back on a lot, was I hated the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And
right.
I thought that was doing a real disservice to being skilled at something. But I eventually realized that if you're gonna create something, whether it's a product or a company, you have to be skilled, but you also have to have access to people that can help you right in that journey and in that endeavor. So I ultimately came to respect the fact that it's both of them. So I've been fortunate to have access to a lot of opportunities and interesting things. And that is just good fortune, ultimately. I didn't have too much, of a part in some of that. So just appreciative for, getting access to opportunities that probably people a lot more capable and smarter than I haven't had access to.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I understand that you yourself have a strong background in both product development and the kind of sales and business side of the company. How do you think that those two very different skill sets have helped you as an entrepreneurial leader? And do you think that one is more important or useful than the other?
Yeah, I don't think that one is more important than the other. And I think that one of the real significant challenges with creating a new product and trying to commercialize a company around that product is that everything matters. It just doesn't matter equally at the same time. So, but I think a big part of product is understanding the problem and customer validation. And there's some sales as part of those things, right? Because, sales, as you alluded to a little bit, is about relationships ultimately. And problem understanding and customer validation around a new product is really building a relationship with a customer who's willing to spend enough time with you to understand the problem and to understand and help you to sort of iterate on the solution to the problem. That's all about building respect and trust and collaborating with that customer, which is really what sales is ultimately. So I think that they're both equally important, and I think that there are skills in both that apply to both. And I think if we get back to sort of the humanistic relationship piece of it, I think that's the common thread across the building of products and then the selling of products.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting that the kind of overlap is actually potentially the most useful part, where it's an understanding of what the problems are and how to fix those. Okay, so do you think there are any common perceptions or ideas that you yourself had about building a business from the ground up that you then realized to be inaccurate after kind of having gone through that journey yourself?
Yeah, I think it's easy for all of us to fall into the trap of two things. One is that we know best, and that we can build a product or start a company that's a very sort of ego-driven exercise. And
Yeah.
the best founders, and frankly the most successful companies over time, are the ones that are the humblest. And yes, ego might be a part of the the initiation of pursuing a company, but the founders that quickly flip the script and make it about the customers and the product and the problem, and put themselves at the end of the line, those are the founders that typically end up being the most successful. And the other thing is, this is also not an epiphany, but it's still easy to fall in this trap. We still think that if we build something cool, that somehow people are going to come, people are going to find out about it, people are going to want it, people are going to find it valuable. And it's not really until probably the last 5 years or so that we've really figured out that we have to value distribution of a product as much as we have to value the building of the product.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Definitely. So kind of on that same grain of obviously you've been through that journey a lot. I know that you're also kind of an investor and advisor to numerous startup companies. I'm keen, sort of on a general note, what do you think is more important for a company at the startup stage? Good advice or strong investment?
Ooh, man, no one's ever asked me that question before. Yeah, that's a good one. I would say this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but it depends. And I think the qualifiers are, if it's a company that has no chance of succeeding without significant capital, right, to execute on the plan, then great advice is not going to help that company overcome the fact that they need a huge capital infusion to deliver on the potential. The same can be said, though, for a company that could succeed growing more slowly, more methodically, in a niche, right, before going broad base. And in that case, advice is probably going to be more important than the capital early on, because they can grow more slowly and more methodically and still fulfill their potential as a company. So I think it depends. And I think we run the risk now too of a lot of startups thinking that they have to raise a lot of capital really early for them to have any chance of success. And they get so caught up in the fundraising part of it that they lose sight of actually digging in with customers around the problem and around a potential solution that customers are going to value. That sometimes I'm concerned that founders have sort of investment, too big of an investment focus versus really digging in with customers and really digging into the problem, which then might elicit and make it easier for them to get investment versus them trying to seek investment before they have some of that early validation.
Oh, that's a very insightful answer, actually. Yeah, thank you. So across that career of yours, I know it's been a long one with a lot of different experiences. Is there a particular achievement or a particular moment that stands out for you as one that you're most proud of?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would say that I'll give you two, but they're very different sort of moments. And one is not to be that proud of it, frankly, because it was something where we got sort of hit over the head with a brick. So the company that I mentioned that I joined, that was the first startup team that I was a part of, we had built this online service, and we were focused on selling it to law firms. And we were at a conference, and a guy comes up to the booth, and he says, "Hey, show me what you've got." And I give him a demo, and he said, "Well, I could use this to do pre-employment screenings." And he was the head of security for a very large international retailer who also happened to be an attorney. That's why he was at the conference. And he said, is there any reason why I couldn't use this, as part of our pre-employment screening process? And I said, well, we don't use it for that. We sell it to law firms. We sell it to attorneys. And he said, well, again, is there any reason I couldn't use it for a pre-employment screening? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, come to my office. And so I met with them a couple of weeks later, and they subscribed, and it changed the whole direction of the company, because we ended up pivoting the product. We still marketed and sold to law firms, but then we went after the pre-employment screening business, and we started marketing to human resources people and security people. And the company grew in the course of 9 months, like 4x. And it was one of those things that, even though he was trying to tell me, look, there's a better market and there's a better target for your product than you're currently working on, I was sort of blind to the fact of what he was trying to tell me. And then eventually, I sort of woke up and he said, hey, this is actually a better market for you guys. And it just sort of reiterates, because I've now seen this over time a lot, where the initial target for a product and the initial value proposition that you think that you have is almost never the one that you end up landing on that is the best one. And you have to stay open-minded to the fact that that's probably going to be the case, that where you start is not where you finish with the product and with the company. So that's one. The other one I would say is we actually give you, a failure. We started a company that we were trying to compete with Guru.com and Upwork, and this was before Upwork existed, but we had an early product in the hire a freelancer space. And we thought our differentiating model was going to be, we were going to hire a local concierge, basically, in every major market that would match make between the freelancers and the people with the projects. The problem is having a person in every major market is expensive. And if you hire them before you have any projects being posted to the platform, and any freelancers replying to projects, you've hired a bunch of concierges to do nothing, essentially. So we burned through a couple of $1 million in like 6 months, and before we realized that our model was completely flawed, it was completely broken, and we made all of the cardinal mistakes, and so. It was an experience that helped, really inform me, even after a couple of successes, that just because you've been successful with one product in one market, trying to solve one problem for a certain set of customers, does not mean you're going to be successful in another space with a different product and a different value proposition, and that you can't just port what you did with one to the other, because they're different problems, different customers, different value propositions, etc. And we had to learn a hard lesson that was the case, because we made every mistake that you can possibly make. And we went to our investors, and the sum of that story is we went to our investors after we burned through a couple $1 million and proved that we didn't know what we were doing. We went to them and asked for more money, and they not only said no, but they said hell no, and they kicked us out of their office. So that was a fun experience.
Well, those are two great examples. It's interesting as well how the two examples that you chose were ones where kind of perhaps you weren't the one to have that kind of realization. The first one, it was very much you being shown a good idea, and the second one was a failure. So I guess my kind of follow up to that is, do you think that the failures and kind of lack of good ideas is more important in moving forwards than your successes and your achievements, or do you think that there's an equal balance there?
I think there's a pretty equal balance. I've heard over time, and I've read a lot that you learn more. People say that you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. I'm not entirely sure that's true, because I think that if you're paying attention during your successes, you should be learning a lot around that formula, right, and that roadmap that worked.
Mm.
I will say what the failures do is they at least keep you humble, right? So they keep you willing to learn and to grow and to challenge your assumptions. And so I would say that I sort of look at it differently now. I think we learn more from our successes, but I think our failures keep us grounded enough that we can learn inside of those successes, because we've been on the other side and we know what it feels like, when we get it wrong. So
Mm.
I think they're both valuable, but I think they're valuable in different ways.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. I haven't actually heard it kind of explained in that way before. So kind of final one on sort of business in a general sense then. Obviously, the past 6 months or so have been a hugely turbulent time with the coronavirus pandemic. How have you kind of adapted to that, and how do you think that will shift the way in which businesses are managed moving forwards?
Yeah, I've always been a little bit of a work vagabond in that I like different settings to work in, because I think it helps with creativity and I think it helps with focus. So personally, I have not spent much time in the office over the last several years, and so working remotely was not something uncomfortable for me. Something different for our team at AWH, the product firm that I'm a principal in. They mostly showed up at the office every day, right, to collaborate and work on building digital products together and with clients. And they all went remote, as most companies did with their teams. And they had the biggest challenge of now adapting to the fact that they now couldn't get around a whiteboard, right, and sort of sketch out some concepts and some user flows and user experiences and even data flows, et cetera. And so the transition to remote and virtual for them, was challenging. But they also didn't really skip a beat, and our work with clients progressed nicely and well and effectively. And a shout out to our clients as well, because they had some participation in making that transition work and go well. But I think the key for us as part of that was we were very transparent about our plans and why we were doing what we were doing, when we were doing it. We also gave the team the tools to facilitate them working remotely and virtually as well, as they could. And we were very intentional about maintaining our culture. So we got the team together consistently, and we still do, around even silly stuff like for the holidays we did a gingerbread making competition, and we sent every team member a gingerbread kit, and then they put it together, and it was corny and it was silly and it was kind of ridiculous, and I'm still upset that my gingerbread house was one of the worst. But we've got to very intentional about making sure that even though we were remote and virtual, that we didn't lose the connectivity between our team members and sort of their roles and contributions for client projects.
Yeah, it's a fantastic answer. I think the key thing there about all the things we've discussed so far is that relationships seem to be sort of at the core of your ethos and what you do. So in terms of I want to talk about sales in particular for a couple of minutes here. There are seemingly kind of new sales ideas and new strategies arising almost on a weekly basis. And these are often accompanied by more and more innovative tools for salespeople. So CRMs, ERPs, automated lead generation tools. To what extent do you think that all of this innovation actually translates into increased sales success?
I don't think much of it does, frankly. And I think that I'm also not a huge fan of sales training, because I think sales training is a shot of adrenaline,
Mm.
And it's kind of a crutch, because a company will send their sales team through sales training, and then everybody's perspective around that afterwards is, okay, now the team is ready to succeed. Now the team is ready to sell better than they were selling pre-training. And everybody's almost always disappointed, because the sales training becomes a crutch, right? And it almost never delivers on the promise. And I think part of that is because sales coaching, ongoing iterative sales coaching, is 100 times better than point in time sales training. Because training is, and if we take a sports analogy, training is what you do on the practice field, right? To make sure that you're fit and you understand your role and you understand the game plan, etc. Coaching is then what happens individually between somebody who understands the big picture and how to maximize your skill and contribution. And that coaching typically happens one-on-one, right? Where training often is in a group setting. So I think sales training has also let a lot of people and a lot of companies down. And I think the reason that tools and sales training and lots of other things have not delivered on the promise is because sales really hasn't changed that much, irrespective of all the other factors over time. It really ultimately comes down to, can you initiate, cultivate a relationship with a potential customer to the point that they don't any longer feel like you're selling them. They feel like it's a collaboration where the outcome now is they get to choose whether to buy or not. And I think that we lose. I think if anything, we've become worse at relationships over time, not better. And I think social media and a lot of digital things have impacted that. But I think the thing that's harmed effective selling probably the most is the fact that we're not as good as we used to be about initiating and cultivating relationships.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's a really fantastic answer. Thank you. Now, I want to talk as well about the kind of more product side. I know that you are a huge kind of product person. And now a lot of companies, especially in the startup phase as well, fail when the product simply doesn't work out. What do you think are some of the key mistakes that businesses make in the R&D phase and the go-to-market strategy of a new product?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of principles that either get overlooked or misunderstood when creating a new product. One of them we spoke about a little bit earlier, but I'm going to mention it again because it's that important. I think if you're going to build a product that users are going to value and want to pay for at an acceptable level, you have to understand the problem at an expert level. Because I don't think you can build a problem and expect customers to pay for it if you don't understand the problem at least as well as they do, if not better. I think the other thing that happens is early stage products either get underbuilt or overbuilt. So they either do more than they need to do, and then there's too much user friction and the user experience is too complicated, or they're underbuilt because people now think that well, I've got to move really fast, which is true, but you can also move too fast. And people have heard the couple of cliches out there, right? Of fail fast and break things, right? And then there's the other quote that's out there around, well, if you're not proud of your first product, then you're not doing it correctly. And the problem with cliches like that and mottos is they get propagated and then they get blown out of proportion. And some products that get released as first products are so poorly designed and so underbuilt that expecting a customer to use it and find value in it, you're just sort of kidding yourself, right? And so there is a fine line between it being overbuilt and underbuilt. But if you understand the problem at an expert level, and if you've spent enough time with customers understanding the problem and iterating on the product, you're going to strike that balance easier and better than if you only understand the problem at a superficial level and you've been building the product mostly in a vacuum, right, on your own. And so I think that, and then I'll add one more: product validation, when you're iterating with a customer on a product, often gets done improperly. Most validation gets done in the positive, and product builders say to customers, tell me what you like about this, tell me how it would be of value to you, and tell me why it's going to be beneficial for you, et cetera. The right way to do product validation is to go to those customers and to say, tell me what you don't like about the product, tell me what it needs to do differently, tell me why you wouldn't use it, because you need to give customers and users permission to tell you what they don't like about the product, because that's where the real meat is. It's not in, hey, tell me what you like about it, because you should already know what they like about it, right? If you've gotten to the point where you're asking, tell me what you like about it, and you truly don't know the answer, you've probably already run askew. And part and parcel to that, you need to be giving them permission to tell you what they don't like about it. And most of us don't do that because we are not wired to go to someone that we want to get a positive response from by asking them a negative question to then get a negative response. So it's counterintuitive, but it works, and it actually works really well that you can condense the time to build a product and the value to customers if you do your validation in a negative connotation versus a positive connotation.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. That's fantastic. Now, just kind of one more question probably from my side. I'm conscious of time here. It's leading on from what you were just saying there, but you're someone who's had a great deal of success in building products and then also in bringing them to market and selling them. So I'm interested from a theoretical point of view, would you rather have a poor product and a great sales team, or a poor sales team and a great product?
Another really good question, and I think it has changed over time. I think 10, 15 years ago, that you could sell a bad product, and I think now that's less true. I think partly because back then, first almost always won. If you were the first product into a space, first meant everything, because it gave you such an advantage over the ones that followed. The first mover advantage was real. I think that's changed now. I think that the best products win. It's hard to build a relationship, right, with a potential customer and user if you can't demonstrate to them that the product is a good fit with their process and the value that they need to get out of it. And there are very few salespeople that are going to be able to put enough lipstick, on a product that isn't that good to sell it effectively. With that said, we also now, though, undervalue distribution, and we tend to build really well designed and built products, and then we don't value the distribution piece of it, with sales being part of that distribution. So sales is still really, really important as part of the distribution strategy for a product, but now the best products win. And if you don't have the best product, Zoom is a great example. We're recording this on Zoom. Right? If anybody had said that they were going to build a new product in the remote virtual online meeting space to compete with WebEx and GoToMeeting and Teams and Hangout and all the free tools that were already out there, most people would say you're crazy. But Zoom has won the day in that space because they actually legit built a better product, right? And so if you build a better product now and you have adequate marketing and distribution around it, the best products win the day, and it's hard to put enough lipstick on a poor product to make it commercially viable now.
Fantastic. Another great answer, Ryan. That's all we've got time for today, but it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I think you've given some really unique insights there into the world of startups from a unique perspective from someone who's had that product background and the commercial background as well. So thank you so much for that.
Ben, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Great combo.
No worries at all. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and tune in next time to Growing Tech Fast.